Let's start with a very interesting Reddit story from NVMax. Demoted then, they realized they effed up. Edited to remove acronyms. I will try to summarize this as much as possible though. Context first. Worked 9 years at a well-known company worldwide provider of various products. Won't name this company, but it was a division of this company I worked for. I started at this company at the bottom as a tech, did my job well, and excelled upwards. After 6 years, I was promoted into the national support group, and also then excelled at this position. It was well paid. And salary, which was very nice bump in pay. And the hours were great. After a year in the new position, I was promoted to a co-operator position, which I shared with another, which we were very good friends and got along very well. To this day, we still do lunches and chat quite frequently. Now I was trained up on the in-house software that runs the dispatching of techs, which was made by an in-house software developer, which the software used codes for areas and states. Very complex, but for him it worked, though no documentation. Whatsoever, no manual, nothing. The guy that had the position before me was leaving the company for a better offer. So he took a month to train me on this software, and of course I wrote down all the codes for all the areas just so I didn't get anything wrong since there was no manual or instructions. He leaves the company. A year later, the developer of this software dies from cancer. So now no one but myself knows how to use this software. And taking vacations were far and in between due to this issue. I constantly asked for a backup to be trained so they can do this job while I go on vacations. At this point, I could only take 2 days at a time for vacation, and my wedding was upcoming in 8 months, and we were taking a month-long honeymoon. No-go got denied every time I requested a replacement to be trained. When my co-operator and I took over this new department, it was in shambles. Our turnover for repairs was sitting around 8 days, which upset a lot of customers due to these machines being used constantly during working hours. We brainstormed and came up with solutions to fix this and reduce downtimes dramatically. The bad thing about this is that it put extreme pressure on logistics to get parts overnight to techs in the field, which logistics manager was okay with, which he in turn hired enough guys to take this burden on and was working out pretty well. This turned out to be great. We reduced our downtime from 8 days to on average 2 days. Customers commented constantly about how much better our service was and how they were definitely happy with how their repairs were going. Then it starts to go south from this point. My manager was looking to move up the ladder and need to hire someone for his position. Of course, me and my co-operator apply for position since we know how to run this division and think we could do the job great. We both get overlooked for manager's friend, which he had no experience in this division whatsoever. He was actually the one of the logistics purchases. He has no idea whatsoever to run our department, nor any technical experience whatsoever. He of course gets this position, and right off the bat, this stupid idiot wants to change how we do things and reduce the strain on the logistics group, co-operator, and myself. Immediately protest and oppose his changes with prejudice and vigor. Though this fell on deaf ears. When he tells us to implement the changes, I refuse, and so does my co-operator. For weeks we argue with manager's friend, which is now my manager, and he gets upset and continuously fights with us to make the changes. We again refuse. I emailed his manager and explained the situation and pointed out that it would increase repairs and our customers would be very unhappy. At this time, we grew the base of our customers 20-fold, and our satisfaction rating on all our reviews were in the upper 90s. Though these emails and everything that co-operator and I were explaining went on deaf ears. At this point, manager's friend feels that I am the instigator of the disobedience, and that week I was called into a conference room with HR, manager's friend and his manager. They informed me I was going to be demoted from operator to dispatcher, due to my inability to be a team player and confrontational to my manager, etc. So I said, fine with me, meant less work and same pay. So I'm okay with this. Now, with this job, you had certain functions of the job that you could and could not do. You could only do what was assigned to you for that job description. Dispatchers could only dispatch calls to techs and not assign their own calls. That was my previous job. My co-operator at the time was in charge of escalations and onboarding techs and did not know the system I used to dispatch these calls. Next day, I come in and sit at my desk, waiting for calls to be put on my board, knowing that there was no one now to dispatch calls to the dispatchers. After about 4 hours, I get approached by manager's friend asking why I was not dispatching calls to everyone. I politely said, "Remember, I got demoted, I can't dispatch, it's not part of my job description, and I don't want to be fired for doing something that I am not allowed to do." The dread on his face could be seen as it streaks up his back and hits him full force. At this point, he realized he just Of course, his manager in HR did not know anything about this software that was developed in-house and had no instructions on how to use it. It was the backbone of this division's dispatching software. Without this, no calls could be dispatched out whatsoever. The news is now getting around that no calls are being dispatched, and manager's friend's manager now enters and asks what is going on. He soon realizes as well what happened. They then call me back into the conference room and ask me to train a replacement. Of course I refuse. The day ends and I go home. Next morning I show up for work on the dot and they call me back in yet again, offering my position back and to please start dispatching calls as soon as possible. Of course I refuse the promotion, pointing out key points that they brought up during my demotion meeting on why they were demoting me. And because of those points, I felt I had to overcome them in order to be able to accept the promotion, and it would be a great time to focus on my abilities that they outlined. They were flabbergasted and frustrated clearly. They get upset and tell me that I am holding the company hostage and that they will have to take me to court. At this point, per my contract, I am now entitled to a lawyer, and they have to pay. Few days go by, of course, no calls being dispatched. They are now relying on emails and phone calls to get calls dispatched and parts ordered, and it's pandemonium abound. It is adding so much more time to each call, and ordering parts, the whole system is falling apart. I finally get contacted by a lawyer telling me that he is to represent me and that he is being paid by the company I work for, but that he works for me, period, that he cannot talk to them. Without my knowledge, he cannot do anything against my own interests and that he is being paid by them but works for me. He goes on to tell me that they can't force me to take a promotion and they can't fire me if I fulfill my obligations of the employment contract, which was pretty easy. Basically just show up on time, take breaks and specified time, and leave at specified time. So I do. This goes on for a month. When they are finally getting to the breaking point, repairs are exceeding 2 weeks and customers are cancelling their repair contracts due to service issues. They decided to demote me again to logistics. Now, the manager of logistics is a good friend and he thinks this is retaliation for all these issues, so he just says to me to take a desk over in the corner and do my thing, whatever I wanted. He wasn't going to punish me for their stupidity. We go to court, they present their case, and my lawyer presents mine. After 2 days, the judge rules in favor of me and says that a company cannot force me into a job or doing a job that I do not wish, and this would be considered enslavement. They pressed the judge to have me turn over the information to run the software that runs their division. The judge asked me if I had it written down. At this point, I didn't have it. I threw it away. So I answered honestly to the judge. Though I did say, I do remember how to use it and all the codes to dispatch. Since I did it for years, it became like second nature. Judge asked me if I would be willing to write down the instructions. I politely said no. Judge said, "Okay, that's that then." Upon coming back to work the next day, I decided to start looking for another job. After about a month, I found a new position at another company, making about 10% more and with better options, and also agreed to give me the month off with salary for my honeymoon. So I wrote up a resignation letter and sent it to my manager, his manager, and the senior staff of the division, and also the CEO of the company, explaining everything that went on and why I was leaving the company, and wished them the best. That Friday, I packed up my personal stuff and left. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the CEO of the company, apologizing for what happened, and that all this information just came to light, and that the individuals involved were terminated, manager's friend and his manager, and the one above him, which was sweet to my ears, and offered my job back. I politely declined. A few weeks after manager's friend was fired, I was told by my good friend and co-operator that he died from a drug overdose. which is sad and completely not deserved no matter how much I hated him. The division I ran was merged into another division a year later. After it was not able to recover, 30% of the people that worked for that division were laid off or transferred to other divisions. My co-operator is still working for same company, though he said after this whole ordeal, it never recovered and never was the same and had gone downhill dramatically, and he will be retiring this year. TLDR, running divisions dispatching. Being the only one that knows the software with no replacements or manuals. Manager demotes me because I won't do things his way that will negatively affect our customers. Go to court, I win. Manager later ODs after being fired. The malicious compliance was perfect and executed masterfully. By strictly following the job description after demotion, OP exposed management's incompetence and forced them to face the chaos they created. It is not just a story of malicious compliance, but also a lesson for those who don't respect their juniors and subordinates. The next story from golden_silver61. Table of Karens make my waiter training a living nightmare. A malicious compliance story. Back in 2014, I was hired to work on a cruise ship. I started off as a lowly restaurant steward, busting tables and mopping floors in the buffet. After a few months, I was promoted to back waiter and was moved to the main dining hall. I quickly caught on to the back waiter duties. My front waiter, who we'll call Bert, not his real name, took notice of my hard work. After a couple of weeks in my new position, Bert told me that it's only a matter of time before I get promoted to front waiter, and he wanted to start training me on how to be one. So he told me to shadow him when the next group of passengers were seated in our section so I can observe how he did his front waiter duties. Unfortunately for us, the next group of passengers seated in our section was an 8-top of Karens. Bert and I welcomed them to the restaurant. They were friendly at first, and the head Karen, an older, heavier set man, asked, "There is a show in the main theatre we want to see that begins in about an hour. Is it possible for us to get our dinners, eat it, and get to the show on time?" To which Bert says, "Absolutely, depending on what you order." After looking over the menu, the Karens were ready to place their order, and 5 out of 8 of them wanted the New York steak, the one single menu item that took the longest to cook. Bert told them this, and that if they all wanted to order the NY steak, that there is no guarantee that we can get them their dinners fast enough to eat and be able to get the show on time. Bert suggested alternative dishes that we could get out much quicker, but the Karens refused to change their orders. Bert read the order back to the Karens, and they all confirmed that it was correct. This is important for later. Bert handed me the ticket, and I ran back to the kitchen to assemble their meals. My first stop was the NY steak counter, and, to my horror, there was a line a mile long of waiters waiting to drop off their tickets. Just so you know, this ship has a max capacity of about 3,500 passengers. The main dining hall seats nearly 1,000 people, and I have never seen the NY counter as busy as it was this night. It seemed like everyone and their mothers were ordering the NY steak. I would have to wait at least 20 minutes just to drop off my ticket, and God knows how long afterwards, till the cook got to my ticket in order to cook them. With the wait time, and juggling the other tables Bert and I had to wait on in our section, I knew there was no chance the Karens can get their meals and make it to the show on time. So I rushed out to Bert, told him what the ETA was on the NY steaks, and that he needed to tell the Karens that they needed to change their order. Otherwise, they will miss their show. Bert relayed my message to them. He came back to me and said that they still refused to change their order. Bert shrugged his shoulders and said, "Bert, well, we did all that we could to try and convince them to change their order so they can make it to the show they wanted to see, but they refused to change it. So if they miss their show, they miss it, and it will be their fault." I did my best to get their meal as quickly as possible, while also waiting on the other tables in our section. Sure enough, the Karens missed the start of the show, and they were pissed. They demanded to speak to the restaurant manager. They fabricated multiple lies about the crappy service they received, saying that we were lazy, incompetent, purposely dragged our feet, and lied about how long they were really waiting for their meals. They said they were waiting over an hour since they got their appetizers when it was only 50 minutes since they were seated in our section at most. Bert and I told the manager our side of the story. He believed us, said he would try and calm the Karens down, but told us to do our best to get the Karens their meals as quickly as possible so we can get them out of the restaurant ASAP. Finally, the meals were ready. I bring them out to the Karens and hoped that this would be the end of the fiasco. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Two of the female Karens called Bert and I back to the table and complained, "Our steaks are rare. We ordered well done." Bert and I huddled. He looked over his notepad where he had the two ladies' steaks written down as rare. He asked me if I heard them say they wanted rare steaks when we took their order earlier on, and I nodded. Yes. Bert approached them and said, "Bert, ladies, my back waiter and I both heard you two say you wanted rare steaks. I read the order back to you, and you both said that the order was correct." But the Karens responded, "We've never ordered rare steaks in our lives. You two messed up. Take these back. We don't want them. We want brand new steaks." So Bert hands me the steaks and told me to go back into the kitchen and order 2 well-done New York steaks on the fly, which is restaurant lingo, for it's an emergency and we need this order right now. So I rushed back into the kitchen. The NY steak counter was still busier than it's ever been. I rushed to the cook and asked for 2 well-done NY steaks on the fly. The cook angrily yells at me, "No one is getting anything on the fly tonight. You get your ass to the back of the line and wait your turn like everyone else." At this point, I began to panic. It was going to be at least another 40 minutes, if not longer, for the 2 Karens to get their well-done steaks. In an alternate reality, this would be a r/malicious compliance story, where I make the Karens wait the near hour-long time for them to get their new steaks as they requested. But I didn't want Bert to deal with the Karens any longer than he had to, and the restaurant manager did tell me to do my best to get them their meals ASAP so we can get them out of the restaurant as quickly as possible. So cue the malicious compliance. The Karens wanted well done. They're going to get well done. There were microwaves in the kitchen. I flipped the steaks over to hide the previously made cut marks, threw them into the microwave, and nuked them till they were well done. I brought them back out to the Karens and prayed to every deity I could think of that they wouldn't realize what I have done. Fortunately, they didn't. The Karens ate their meal in complete silence, giving Bert and I the dirtiest glares while doing so, and stormed off when they were finished. Once they left, I told Bert what I did. It took him a moment to process what I told him, and he finally said, "Bert, under normal circumstances, I would be very upset with you, and I strongly suggest that you never do what you just did ever again. However, these aren't normal circumstances. Those people were rude, unreasonable, liars, and they didn't even tip. So you know what? Them. I'm glad they missed their show. In the near 2 years I've worked on that ship, I've dealt with many Karens. Stories for another day. But I'll never forget this one. Just a reminder to everyone reading this story to please be kind to your waiters. The malicious compliance was perfect and was executed strategically. Such rude customers should be banned from restaurants. No matter what is one's role and what is one's job, everyone deserves respect. People who don't respect their subordinates must be treated the way OP did. Kudos to OP teaching Karens a bitter lesson.